everybody, this is Ingrid and I'm going to talk about Nine of Swords. If you watch the Eight of Swords, I talked about the confusion, hiding in your head, not being connected to your heart. In Nine of Swords, it is a bit more severe than, because now it's like sleepless nights, laying awake at night, worrying. It's like not being on top of things, feeling overwhelmed with anxiety often, and feeling that life is just spinning a little bit out of control. It can be also guilt and regrets, negativity, negative thoughts, feeling unworthy, fearful, worrying a lot about the future often. What the seeker really needs again is to make more of a connection to their hearts and their soul, because there's a lack of optimism here, and you see that in the Rider-Waite, the black wall. It's like it's no optimism. And also the blanket is a symbol of wanting to cover up, meaning needing protection. So it could have been PTSD, like something could have really shook the seeker, and it could have made them feel fearful of living, and they want to just cuddle up in a blanket and hide away from the world. And it can also mean that if you get it with the moon, that there's mental health issues as well, and the seeker needs to seek some help. But if you do get more pentacles, it could be like worrying about money. If you get a lot of swords, then it could just be like too much mental energy, but nowhere to really channel it. It needs to be channeled through in a positive way. If you get a lot of court cards, then it can mean that if other people putting pressure on the seeker, or they just don't feel like they're fitting in, or they're worrying about somebody. If you do get the Nine of Swords with Nine of Wands, for example, it could be just feeling beaten up by life and having a lack of energy. If you get it with Cups, it can mean then that you kind of a sponge, just soaking up all the energies, but then not really knowing how to channel it out. So it could just be then that you just absorbing a lot of negative energy from people. If you get Nine of Swords in a love reading, it can mean that the seeker that the seeker is really worried about relationships. If the seeker is in a relationship, it could mean that the relationship is causing some stress, that they're going through worrying time together. Maybe they're worrying about their partner. Maybe the relationship is a stressful relationship. If the seeker is single, it can mean that they're very lonely, and maybe they have some regrets about the past, because 9 is also about the past. It's very easy with the 9 energy to be very consumed with the past. So look, if you're doing the Celtic Cross, look at the 4th card. The 4th card is the past that has really shaped the seeker in a big way. Especially if you get like a major arcana card, it means that the seeker was meant to go through something that was going to be a big part of their destiny. So if you get 9 of Swords in outcome, but then you actually get a major arcana card in the 4th position, it means that this is something the seeker will have to go through. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. They really have to go through this, because this is part of something much bigger than themselves, and it's also part of their destiny. So they're gonna come to some conclusion or some clarity about it. They're gonna be able to bring forth a lot of strength. But they'll have to go through. They can't avoid it. But it's actually an arrow there of alignment between the major arcana card in the 4th position and the 9. So that actually it's with all the 9s, but even a negative card like 9 of Swords then becomes less negative, because it's very temporary, this feeling of doom and gloom. It's actually something they're meant to learn, most likely so they can help other people in some way. 9 of Swords in a career reading, it can mean a job that they're not very compatible with. It could be a career path that is consuming them or eating away at them, and they're just not really loving it. It's a job that they dread, and they don't want to go to work. They stay up late at night, or they don't sleep at all because they're worried about the job that they do. It can also mean, if it's the type of work, that you're working in mental health, or you're working a lot of night shifts. But it can be an indication that there's a lack of balance in work. In yes or no, Nine of Swords is more likely a no. Nine of Swords as feelings can speak of fears, guilt and shame, regrets. They need to learn to love and accept who they are, good and bad, you know. Everyone is both good and bad. So it's about accepting all of you. It could be that they think that they have to be one way and they can't accept themselves for who they truly are. But the lesson in Nine of Swords, especially when it comes to feelings, is to be able to accept oneself for who they are. Like, to accept yourself for who you are, not for who you wish you could be. If you're asking how someone is feeling about you, then this person is most likely worried about you. They could be, they could have a lot of fears as well. Maybe they're worried about losing you if it's a relationship. If it's a friendship, maybe they have regrets in this relationship and they want to change things. The way I drew this card is someone who's kind of overwhelmed with emotion, sinking into the ocean, and there's a shark coming. So it's like, it's or being overwhelmed, you know, with sorrow as well, and also feeling that life is out of control. Nine of Swords as personality. This is a personality that they're a bit fragile. They could be on the receiving end of other people's cruel behavior, and it leaves them damaged. It could be that they're so sensitive and they take things to heart, and they just have a hard time letting things go. They end up in the past all the time in their minds, and they often end up dragged into disputes. They feel overwhelmed. They feel like life is out of control. They crave order and comfort, but they feel like their security is always threatened, and they're always thinking about what they can do to keep themselves safe, but it ends up consuming them. So they often want perfection, and they want guaranteed outcomes and security, but it just ends up turning into a nightmare, this whole pursuit. It's better to be in the flow and work with flow. That's the lesson in Nine of Swords, is to go with the flow, work with the flow energy. With the nines, you'll end up landing on your feet. That's what the seeker is learning. But they often question also their past and their past decisions. So there's jarring energy, and that takes them out of the flow. So they need to just let things go and just be back in the flow, because with all of the nines, they're actually just meant to go with the flow. The flow is what will save them. If they try and work against the flow and working against their destiny, they get thrown around straight away, more than any other number. So there's an air of unease often about them, because with the nines, you're really not meant to fight your destiny. You're meant to go with it. Other numbers are a little bit more forgiving, like you can there's a little bit more of the free will seen in the other numbers, especially number 6, where you can more take a situation and create from it. But with the nines, you are just meant to go with the flow, work with the flow energy. Everything will come together as of magic. You will land on your feet, and you will be able to guide other and lead other in almost any kind of situations once you know how to do this. It's like a magic trick almost. But if the Nine of Swords, like if you get the Nine of Swords, and you're more worrying and trying to control things that can't be controlled. Nine of Swords reversed then can mean that the seeker is ignoring what they should be dealing with, and they just don't know how to let go. So they need to take a look back at Eight of Swords. There's a lesson that was missed there. So what they can do is to need to look at what they focused on, or what details they thought was important or wasn't important. What big picture did they not see? Because unless they can let go of it, they're gonna just focus on the wrong thing until they had just end up in such a state. They're gonna end up with panic attacks often, and suffer a lot of anxiety because they're focusing on the wrong thing. And that's seen in Nine of Swords, it's seen in Eight of Swords, but it's even more so seen in Nine of Swords reversed. And if it is a personality type and it is reversed, then it's someone who's super committed to their viewpoint. that even if their destiny and their flow is showing them every day something different is true, they just cannot let it go. They just want to live out this viewpoint, even if it's harmful to them. And they also often end up justifying their own behavior, even if it's bad behavior, because they think often that the world owes them something, and they are actually the ones that are meant to rise up and be the healers and the leaders and make the world a better place. But when it's reversed in Nine of Swords, they are sitting there waiting for someone to come and make things right in their lives. And that this mentality, it ends up hurting them, and it goes directly against their destiny. And burying their head in the sand also creates a lack of self-awareness, and they're unable to question their own actions, motives, and it makes them hypocritical. So it's really important that they go back to Eight of Swords and learn their lesson there, which was connecting to the heart, and to see what's important to them, not what is important to everybody else. So much like, yes, that's important to be respectful and everything, but it's also important to know what your one's values are, because it's almost like from Eight of Swords, actually from Seven of Swords to Eight of Swords to Nine of Swords to all the way through to Ten of Swords, it's almost like the seeker has lost touch with their own value system in one way or the other. And it leaves them misinformed and confused, and everything gets twisted around. Now let's have a look at the runes with Nine of Swords. Okay, so they're living out, because remember how I got, if you did watch the Eight of Swords one, I got Otala. That's sort of what they were thinking of. And Otala is not a negative rune, but you have to read it in the context of understanding these cards that are more challenging in nature. When can Otala be a bit challenging? Now Otala fell low fell low, and it can mean that they are spiritually, because this is a very spiritual rune, Otala, but it's like your spiritual value system. Like, it's what you know in your soul is true and right. When it is reversed, it can mean that there is lack of a conscience almost, or the seeker is just not, they don't have a lot of empathy. They might have cognitive empathy, but maybe they don't really have a heartfelt empathy. It didn't fell reverse, it just fell kind of low. So it could mean that they're kind of constantly dragged down, and they're emotionally completely emptied out, and they're trying to be helpful, they're trying to give of themselves, but it's at a low level, to the point where they're actually meant to just rise above it, because it doesn't serve them to stay in there. It's like sympathy, where they get dragged into the pit, rather than empathy from a higher place, where they can help people and teach people to get up. And that might not even be possible. But with Nine of Swords, it's almost like they're unable to look away, or they're unable to. They have to look at all the negative stuff. They're unable to look away, to focus on positivity. They're always drawn to the negative, and they always end up in the pit. So what the lesson in Nine of Swords is actually to look away, because the flow and their destiny is taking them somewhere else, but they're constantly being dragged into the sort of pit of despair, where there's a lot of victim mentality, and they're unable to discern what is actual beneficial to give, and where it's just going to be a complete disaster, so they need actually some good boundaries, because you can be too kind and helpful, and you want to help everybody, end up wrecked, But in Nine of Swords reverse, it actually also is often that they're bought into some belief that it leaves them very much at a point where they're unable to help themselves, let alone everybody else. So if you get Nine of Swords, you have to question yourself: do you have to fight evil every time, all the time, every day? That's question number one. And if you do feel that you're obligated to do that, change it. I mean, you don't have to change it, but if you change it, your life will be easier. Free yourself from the obligation of fighting evil every second of every day. Do you feel obligated to help everybody? Because you can't help everybody. Are Can you discern between someone who's manipulating you or someone who genuinely needs your help? This is where you need the clarity. So this is where mind belief work will help you a lot. So this is a lesson for everybody, actually, to try and see things clearer. There's a reason they say the road to hell is filled with good intentions. That is actually Nine of Swords a little bit. They're trying too hard, but it just keeps getting worse. So that's where the seeker actually needs to have some clarity about how they're meant to bring all the good things in life, because the nines are the humanitarian and they do want to help people. It's just about learning the how to help in the best way. So you can do that as a download. Creator of all, show me how I can best help people in a way that gives me joy, makes you proud, Creator, in the highest and best way with grace and ease. Thank you, it is done, it is done, it is done. Because it's with helping people, if it doesn't give you any kind of joy or satisfaction, then you just get drained and it will lead to resentment in the end. So that's a lesson in Nine of Swords. And now I'm going to talk about Ten of Swords.